the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Erica Richmond. Erica, I am so glad you are on the show. Thank you for coming.
Hello, I'm so excited too. I've been really looking forward to this.
Thank you so much. I would love for you to start with how did you get into writing?
Mm. I honestly, I can't remember a time that I wasn't writing. I used to, as a kid, I journaled, I wrote a lot of poetry from a young age. My first poem I wrote was when I think I was about 8 that the first poem that I have written, like, written down, and we were moving, and it was a big move. It was my second move, but a big move for me because 'cause I'd been living out in the country, traipsing through fields and cow pastures and living my life that way, and we were moving to a city, and so I wrote a poem that was, "We're moving today to a house far away, by the city. What a pity. I don't wanna move today."
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and so that from then, I think I just constantly wrote, and I wrote as a way, of really processing my feelings, and sharing them in a way. Oh, this is Lucy, by
Hi,
the way.
Lucy. And for those
Um,
who are listening, we have a kitty joining us, and so of
yeah.
course, I'm going to love that. So, hi, Lucy.
So yeah, so I've always written as a way to really process my feelings and to really hash them out, get familiar with them, put them down on paper. And so that obviously started as a really young child and has continued to this day.
I love that. And the thing that you've hit on that I would love for us to explore a little bit more is the fact that you mentioned big feelings, that
Mhm.
writing helps you, explore, unpack, process. I mean, I really love how you basically used writing as a form of, it was cathartic, but it's a form of healing in a sense. You know, if there are listeners who are feeling stuck in their writing or feeling like they are trying to process something big and sometimes even figuring out where to start writing that it might feel even like stuck having to, how do I even start to unpack that? What would you say to them?
I would start with reminding them that the stories happen to them, that they own them. They are the ones that get to hold a pen. They are the ones that really get to share these experiences and really give them that power and that feeling of confidence to just own it and write them down. And saying that, I know that still can be challenging, particularly like you said, that first step, that first writing it down. And for me, I do a variety of things when I'm stuck like that. I will go for a walk and let nature and movement really impact how, let all these big feelings that are happening in my head, let them settle a bit down. I will also very often turn to art in these situations. I have studied some expressive arts therapy and really through that understood the impact and the way that art can really facilitate and work really well with writing. And I am not someone that I would call myself an artist. So when I say art, I mean like scribbles. So we're not talking about creating the Mona Lisa on page. This is like taking a crayon and scribbling all over. And sometimes it's just a matter of letting something flow on paper to release, to unstick us and to let the words then flow through. And so often when we're really stuck at the beginning, just little tricks like that, basically not writing, can help us write.
Okay, I love that. And first off, I love unstick. That's
Yeah.
cool. But I also feel like my little stick men that I draw to help me process and right now, full disclosure, my dogs and squirrels and cats and quite honestly, penguins, they all kind of look about the same. They're just little circles and it's really, how the appendages are there and how they're slightly oriented, but they're all kind of about the same, but I will draw those. I can't tell you how many times I would do that just to you know, get an idea moving or get some thoughts circulating. So the fact that, to your point, it's not about being perfect, it's about just your pen to paper kind of thing and just seeing what's coming out, even if what you're doing is coloring, it's
Yeah.
something. For me, sometimes cooking
Mm,
or baking helps, like
yeah.
literally putting my hands to do something else and creating in a different way.
Yeah.
And inevitably, my phone is beside me. I will put it on voice record and then ideas flow, and it will happen with pieces I'm writing, pieces I'm editing, or I'm working with a client and their project's on my mind. It's always on my mind. So then I sit there and start voicing stuff into my phone to help kind of capture that because I've been doing something else. So I love that you said that.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
kneading dough. That's another great one, right? When we're baking, the process of kneading that bread dough can be so cathartic.
yes, yes, or chopping. Sometimes chopping vegetables can be because, but I love that. I love that you said that.
Yeah.
And what I hear you saying is if that writer feels a bit stuck, that something they might need to be reminded that their words matter. Would you
Mhm.
agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, that was a bit of a roadblock for a while. I can tell you that I can look when I look back through my life, there were about 10 years where I didn't write at all. And they were the most unhappy times of my life. And, it's the chicken and the egg. Was I unhappy because I wasn't writing? Was I not writing because I wasn't happy? I'm not sure, but there's definitely a correlation there. But I also think that during that time, I really didn't believe that my words mattered. And so, what was the point of writing them down? And I think that as writers, we have to believe that. We have to know our words really do matter, and they matter because they matter to us. And that's really the most important thing, is that our words matter to us, that we own them, that they're our stories, and that we get to write them down and we get to hold that pen and the narrative.
I love that. I think that is really important is that, sometimes as a writer, we can kind of be in our heads, in the sense of saying, well, who's going to like this? Well, who's going to read this? Will it be any good? Or what happens if I get not so great feedback? Does that mean that I can't write? Or does that mean that this story isn't any good? And what I hear you saying is that's a form of imposter syndrome speaking. And
Mhm.
what you're saying is a way to combat that is to write anyway. That
Oh my,
remember that your words matter because they matter to you. So write anyway.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the times that I need to write the most are the times that I don't want to write. I do, so I write morning pages every day, which is 3 full pages of handwritten journaling, basically, stream of consciousness. It's a form of writing that was created by Julia Cameron, and I've been doing them pretty consistently for about 4 years now, and they make a huge difference. And it's really just a stream of consciousness, this like pen to page and don't stop for 3 pages. And for me, that reminds me that I am a writer because I'm writing these words down, that my words matter because I'm writing them down and I'm seeing them appear on the page. They exist in the real world. So my feelings and my stories and my experiences, they're real. And they belong to me, and I get to write them because I'm a writer.
I love that. I love that so much. And so one of the things I know that you have done is that you found a way to help more people with this same idea, but not just in coaching them through workshops and coaching them as a writing mentor, but you wrote books to help show that words matter and unpacking big feelings so that your readers can see themselves and recognize that they can do this too. They can have that joy. They can process those big things too. Would you talk about how that came about?
Yeah. So the the first book that I've published is called Pixie and the Bees, and I just happen to have a copy here.
I love that. It's so pretty.
Yeah,
She's so cute.
right. So I had been suffering for about a year. I'd been going to my doctor every week. I was feeling nauseous all the time, like all day. I would wake up in the night and feel nauseous. My body was in pain. I was, and my doctor was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, who can say that their family doctor sees them weekly? And mine did, and she really held my hand through the whole thing. I, for a while, thought I must be dying, but she ran all these tests, and every once in a while she would say, "You know what? I think it might be anxiety," and I'd say, "No, that can't be it, because it's I can feel it. Like it's not anxiety. It's not in my head. This is real." And after almost the year, finally I said, okay, maybe it's anxiety. So was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder throughout that year, and I was feeling all of these things, these big feelings, but on the outside I looked completely fine. There was nothing wrong with me on the outside. And so I would go to work and request accommodations and just say, I can't. And they would say, well, you look fine. And even my friends and family, who were incredibly supportive, really had a hard time understanding what was happening to me, because on the outside I looked fine. And so, feeling really frustrated with all these big things around me, I sat outside on my back deck one day and just was like, I need to write this out, because again, that is how I process and unpack everything that happens in my life. And so I sat out and said, okay, what do I feel? I feel like I have these bees buzzing through my body all the time. Like I just felt this like intense vibration. And so I sat down and wrote a story about a pixie who swallows a bunch of bees. Um, and they lived inside of her. And so, just like me feeling all these bees inside of me, the pixie had all these bees inside of her, and no one else could see them or hear them or feel them. And so the story goes on to talk about how she really needs to lean into herself and trust herself, and release some of the bees.
I love that. I
Mhm.
love that you not just wrote about it in a way to help yourself. And I'm sorry that you went through so much, but I am glad that you found the right people and trusted yourself to say, okay, I think I have a way that I can move forward and in a way that feels good to me and that I'm honoring myself. So I commend you. I think that is awesome. But what I also love is the fact that you wrote stories, but you wrote a children's book about it. So what made you decide to write in this medium? You could have written a nonfiction, you could have created a different form of fiction altogether. You could have done so many other different venues. What made you decide a children's book?
So I had been introduced to this way of writing through one of my expressive arts classes. And it had been a year or two before that. And I had never thought of writing that way before. I never would have imagined myself writing children's books. But what I love about this type of writing is that it makes everything really accessible. It means that I can take something that it felt so big and overbearing, and just something that I didn't know how I was ever going to overcome it, and put it into this format that children can read and lean into, that adults can read, and that it doesn't say anything about anxiety. It doesn't say anything about mental health. It is a story about a pixie who swallows bees and has to figure out a way to get rid of them, and what it's like to have something happening inside of you that no one else can see, which can be relatable in so many different situations. And so that's why I mostly wrote it. I was like, okay, I want it to be accessible. I also wanted to make it a little less scary for me. And so yeah, and so Pixie it was a kind of like a nickname that I'd had for a while. I actually um I got it from an Ani DeFranco song called Pixie. And so yeah, all of a sudden Pixie was born. And so I wrote the story on my back deck, and then decided, I shared it with some friends, and they're like, you should publish it. And I asked a woman in town who I knew, and she's an artist, and asked if she would illustrate it. And before long we had a book published.
I love that. I love that so, so much because I think when a children's book is well written, that it does touch the adult just as much as it touches the child. It's just they're doing it it's doing it in slightly different ways. The adult has more wherewithal to be able to process other things and see what's not being said and then take that and apply it and be able to help the child understand too. And then it gives the child a chance to learn more, to appreciate more, and they can ask the questions that they need to ask in a safe space because we've been probably reading this together. And I love that so very much. I think that is so cool. So what was it like seeing Pixie come to life as an illustration?
Oh my gosh. It was amazing. So, Brooklyn, my illustrator, we actually did this during the very first lockdown of COVID.
Okay.
She was going to school at the time, but at home. So it was art school that she was in, and I messaged her. We communicated by text, and she sent me images back and forth. So when she sent me the first pictures of Pixie, I was blown away. I was like, okay, it was nothing like what I had thought it was going to look like. But better. So yeah, she really captured it. And I've always loved Brooklyn's illustrations. So I knew that she would do a great job with it. So watching the story come to life made it extra real, right? Like it made these experiences, again, these experiences that nobody else could see, that happened to me, that made me feel very alone and isolated. All of a sudden, it was there. It was happening. I was like, wow, my story is real. And maybe other people might be able to see themselves in this too. And maybe they might read it and not feel so alone like I did.
Okay, you have touched on a few things I would love to just ask a little bit more. So first off, you mentioned that the illustration didn't look like what you had in mind, but it was better.
Yeah.
What was that like when you realized that what you thought and what came back were different? Like was because sometimes when you're, especially when you're dealing with an illustration or a book or even a book cover, regardless of the genre, you might have an idea, but if you are working with somebody who you feel really understands you and your space and what you're writing, the genre and so forth, and then you're waiting to see what they bring back. Sometimes, like you said, it's better, but how did you know? Like, would you talk about that?
Yeah, I think for me, what was really interesting about it was that all of a sudden I realized that, wow, like other people will see Pixie in their own way, right? Like I see Pixie in my way, you'll see Pixie in your mind another way. Like your everyone's story, like everyone's going to read it and it's going to drum up a different image for them, even though there's illustrations in the book, but they'll still have their own images. And so that was really cool for me because suddenly it was like, oh, this is so neat. Like she's been able to read it and this is her interpretation of Pixie, and this is her interpretation of what this story means and what it looks like. And yeah, so that was super cool. And like I said, it was, so much better. I mean, she's an artist, an illustrator for good reason. And that's again a good reason why I hire someone else, because it would not look the same if I had done it. Um
I
so
get
yeah,
that.
but yeah, it was really neat. It was really cool to see, to realize that other people are reading my story and conjuring up their own images and ideas around it.
I love that. I love that so much. And so you mentioned something else, which was about sharing it. You were
Mhm.
sharing your piece. And what was that like taking something that felt really special, really that helped you, like you were saying, process those big feelings. You shared it with somebody you trusted, and that created the illustrations, and thus the book was published. But what was it like after you hit publish?
I think it's like this equal mix of sheer terror and excitement. Like was like, oh my God, what did I do? People are now going to read it. And I didn't even let my parents read the story until I sent them a copy in the mail. Um, and not because I didn't trust them, but just because I was like, I wanted them to see the full thing. I was like, I don't want you to like just hear the story and then get the book. Like I want you to experience the story once it's all done. So in that, like I'd let people read it, but not in the same way, but not like tons and tons of people. So this was suddenly out there. And honestly, the feedback has been incredible. The conversations that I've had with people, that's where it's at. So I was really thinking like, okay, people are gonna say, I loved it, I hated it, 5 stars, 1 star. Basically, was like, it's either or. There, no one's gonna be anywhere in the middle. It's gonna be, I loved it, I hated it. But I got conversations. So I received stories back from people in response to my story. And that's when I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is this is not, it's this, yes, it's my story and it's my story about Pixie, but when I put it out there in the world, it suddenly becomes everyone's story. And it suddenly becomes this opportunity for other people to not only see themselves in that story, but to mirror back their own version of it. And so when I was able to have these conversations with people, it was incredible. Yeah.
I love that. I have goosebumps. I mean, I've just been like cold this whole time because I have so many little goosebumps happening. I love that. But so, okay, so building upon the momentum. So we've shared the book, you're getting feedback.
Yeah.
I'm sure Pixie's story is continuing but tell me more, like what's happened because of that?
Yeah, so Pixie and the Bees is currently being used in school boards, social work offices, doctors' offices across the country, which is really cool. I get so excited when I hear that. When people are like, "Oh yeah, like I bought it for the daycare I work at," or "So I'm a social worker, I'm going to buy this for my office so I can like share it with my clients." It's like, again, the opening up these conversations, which is not what I had intended at all. Like it wasn't, I don't like, I just was like, I'm gonna publish my story and see what happens. But to know that it's receiving this impact, or it's providing an impact to other people is more than I ever could have imagined. So yeah, it's been so great. And it's again opened up conversations with other people and allowed me to share and to help through my own experiences.
And does Pixie have a sequel?
She does. So, yes. So when I wrote Pixie in the back of the book, I said, stay tuned for more Pixie stories, and then didn't do anything about that. And then I kept thinking, I'm like, oh, I should do a Pixie story. So yeah, so the next book is Pixie and the Fox. And no, she does not swallow a fox. Which was one of the questions I got from somebody, because she swallows the bees. And I said, well, that would make a really interesting series, but no. She doesn't. It's a fox that she meets, and really excited. This one is, it's not about anxiety, but it's another big feeling story that Pixie works through within the book.
I love that. I love that so much. So I know you've been doing workshops and sharing your message through speaking engagements or through workshops and really kind of helping to share that message of, you know, I'm a writer and my words matter. But what is that like? What does that feel like to you when you're able to share your message like that?
Mm. S- It's it is the most incredible thing to have people message me back and say, "Hey, guess what? I'm a writer, and I never knew that I was before, but because of you, because of the workshops, because of what I'm seeing you say on social media, your newsletters, like all of that, people are like, I really feel like I'm a writer and I really feel like my words matter." And it is magic. It's I can't even, I'm like stumped for words right now, because it's the most beautiful thing, and it's more than I ever could have hoped for when I get those messages from people and the conversations with people that they really believe, and not believe, they know that they're a writer. And I think for me is that I don't care about perfect grammar or spelling. And I will say that, like, I do editing as well. So I do have a technical side of my brain that works. But for the purposes of my workshops, of my mentorship programs and my speaking engagements, all of that is just around get your words out, get your story to hold. Who cares if you're using proper grammar? Who cares if you know how to spell that word or not? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're getting your story out, and that you're sharing it with other people, and that you're owning it. It belongs to you.
I love that so much because what you're exemplifying in Pixie is that she's doing that. By what you're sharing with Pixie, you know, understanding who she is, she's going back in and saying, no, I should be speaking up for myself. I need to tell my story, even if telling my story is saying, hey, I think I swallowed bees and they don't feel really good. How do, help me come through that? That's speaking up. That's still saying my words matter because this is what's happening. And I'm saying I need help. I'm owning that. And I love that she also understood that that wasn't what she wanted, that she was she's a pixie. So she's light, she's bright, she's happy. This
Yeah.
is not, this isn't feeling contrarian to that. So she's wanting to go back to what she is, saying she is a writer. I love that. I love
Mhm.
that so much.
Yeah, and I mean, there's in Pixie and the Fox, Pixie really has to dig deep inside of herself and really trust herself and believe in who she is to come back to the pixie, to being a pixie, to be, as you said, to be light and have laughter and be free in the world. But she has to work through a lot to get to that point. And so we get to watch Pixie and learn from her and how she does that.
But what I love about what you're saying is that, again, going back to just what was going on with Pixie and the Bees, you you took a big concept and breaking it down to something smaller, to something, and not smaller in this, it really in size as much as easily digested. It's easier to get your arms around, to conceptually understand. You're taking something really big and breaking it down so that a child, you know, a 7-year-old can read this and go, oh, I think I understand. And they might take away one thing, but the
Mm.
adult reading with them might take away something else, or the teenager reading with them. Maybe it's a babysitter reading to them or an older sibling.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a cousin who's reading and they take away something else that, like you said earlier, Pixie is, takes on her appearance, her what she feels like to the reader, just like your illustrator showed you who's what she saw in Pixie, which was a little different, but I can see how that's helping. That's awesome.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really interesting. And in Pixie and the Bees, just again having conversations with children and adults and seeing, yeah, they're both and parents fight for their teenagers. So everyone is, one woman likened the bees to chemo. She'd been going through chemo, and to her that was it. One dad told me that his son, who was, I believe, around 7 at the time, had severe anxiety and would often be found just curled up looking through Pixie and the Bees by himself, which
Oh my
was
goodness.
just the most incredible thing. So, and talking to people all the time at different events that I go to, that they're able to see a bit of themselves in Pixie, regardless of what that is. And I'm really excited around Pixie and the Fox because there's going to be some great conversations that come from that. And I cannot wait to have them with people.
But what I hear you saying too is, so when we started this conversation, it was about there's sometimes writers they might be in their way of processing something heavy, or how do they get this idea out? Or they might be facing fear of sharing that story because, well, what if it isn't any good? What happens if you don't get positive feedback? What happens if it's not this or that? But what I hear you saying is that when you can find a way to overcome and recognize that you want to, that the joy, that the excitement that you have, that the peace that you have of sharing your story outweighs the fear or the worry that may not even happen. you know I hear you doing that. Do you have any tips for someone who might be sitting there going, okay, I have this story, I wrote this story, and I think I want to see where I can go. I maybe I've stopped writing for a little bit because I was in my way, but after this conversation, I feel like I can get back into the swing of things. I'm going to go back. I'm going to finish this. Or maybe they're sitting there going, I finished this story, but oh my gosh, I'm really nervous of sharing. What would you say to them?
So I would say, so for the person who has written a story and is scared to share it, I want them to think of one person that they trust, their best friend, a parent, a sibling, a partner in their lives, somebody who they really trust, who they know is a cheerleader for them, that loves them, that knows them. And I want them to think about sharing it with that person, just that one person, not everyone in the world, one person. And just think about what it would feel like for them to say, I would love to read your story. Please share it with me. And and just think about what that feels like for someone to say, I really want to read your words. I really want to hear your story. Because that in itself is so empowering to know that other people really want to read it and they want to hear what we have to say. And then once they've got that feeling, ask them, say, hey, would you read my story? I've written something and I would love to share it with you. And the other thing that I find really helpful is to direct some of the feedback that you're looking for. And it depends on who you're sharing it with, because some people are just natural editors and are going to want to share a lot. And maybe at the early stages, I would say, you know what, I just want to share it with you. And without like, I'm not looking for a lot of feedback right now. I just want to share it. And maybe that's enough. And then, once you hear back from them, who are, like they're one of your biggest cheerleaders ever. So they're going to come back and say, this was amazing. You're amazing. I love you. And then I want you to think about another person that you can share it to, and then slowly expand. So you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to write your story and hit publish. You don't have to share it on social media for everybody to see. Start with one person and slowly, slowly, slowly expand. And if you don't have one person, send it to me. I would love to read it.
I think that is really sweet. I love that you said that. Thank you very much, because I know that you mean that. I know
Yeah.
that you mean that. That is so awesome. And if there's somebody who has hit publish
Mhm.
and they feel a little in their head now that it's out there and they're a little worried about, just feels weird now, do you have any tips or encouragement for them?
Yeah, it's a weird feeling to hit publish. And sometimes it can be a bit anticlimactic. Like you think all of a sudden your inbox is going to be overloaded. And it's not always. So I think the thing to remember once you've hit published is, again, stay true to yourself. Remember how special and how important it is for you to have written your story, to have put it out there, how brave it was for you to do that, how powerful it is. I want you to build yourself up with confidence, with this, like, I did it. I want you to keep looking at your name on that book cover that says, I wrote this. I did it. And just keep slowly sharing it. And again, it can be really hard. Even when you've hit publish, it can be hard to promote that, to tell people, hey, I wrote a book and here it is. But again, gradually keep putting it out there.
I love that. So, Erica, this has been phenomenal. Where can people connect with you? Where can they find out about Pixie and the Fox? Where can they become a part of your world? And if they do want to send their piece, if they feel like they are ready to share and they want to share with you, how can they do all those things?
Wonderful. Okay, so I am on social media at Open Sky Stories, Instagram, Facebook mostly. My website is openskysstories.com. So those are the two main ways you can reach me. If you want to send me your story or ask me any questions, you can send me an email, erica@openskysstories.com. And when you get to my news or to my website, I would really encourage you to sign up for my newsletter, which is called Inspired Ink. And that is where I'll be sharing all of the updates around Pixie and the Fox. And so you'll get to know, it will be released in spring. So you'll know where to buy it, when to buy it, what to look for. You can also look at my Amazon page. I have an author page on Amazon, which is where all my books are at.
Awesome. Erica, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been fantastic.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.